So it is my great pleasure to welcome you all in the room here and also in the room online, various rooms online, in this two-day event, Seaside Arts and Low-Trophic Theories. So we are starting, we here on location actually have had a really intense morning on sun weather, and of course you will learn, I mean, you will hear in the room, people will hear a little bit more about, background for this. People in various locations will hear a little bit more about actually what we have done. That's very exciting. So, without further ado, I would actually like to introduce the curators of this panel, which I'm very excited about. And of course, the curators will introduce everyone else in the panel. So my role will be, I won't take too much time. So it is my great pleasure to introduce you to part of the biomass, which is an artist and research collective initiated by Jana Holmstedt and Malin Nobel, and run together with Karin Becker, who is actually just, in front of me on the other side of camera. Of course, all based in Sweden. Through combining their skills as artists, gardeners, researchers, and filmmakers, they engage in exploratory work where multi-species relations, as well as environmental care and attention, can be cultivated. And critical, creative, and collaborative processes where you can get your hands dirty are the part of their genre disobedient practices. So ongoing works include the Sea Garden, Gibson, Plaster Island, Four Sisters of Planthropocene, and the art and research project Humus Economicus, about which, of course, you can read much more on the part of the biomass website. So thank you so much. And yes, I'm passing the baton.
Thank you, Marietta. Thank you for this introduction. Yes, we had this wonderful excursion yesterday morning, and I hope all of you also had time to be outdoors before we start this session online. And I hope you also had a chance to listen to Professor Stacey Limo last evening. It was an amazing talk. She spoke about the challenges of bringing deep sea awareness and global concerns for the to the shoreline, so to speak, and how daily practices and collective local actions are necessary for keeping the issues alive, which brought us to the potential of the habitat garden as a site to cultivate connectivity and care on a local level, while still keeping the planetary in mind. Where scales can be shifted, as she said, rather than scaled up and away. So we're picking up that conversational thread today. As it happens, is the topic of this panel is sea gardens. And we will circle around the question of how to cultivate multi-species commons and futures in coastal areas. And we offer the idea of the sea garden as a site for both speculation and concrete action. And we'll touch on topics such as restoration of marine environments, adaptation among marine species to environmental changes, and also the surge in interest for sea farming and sustainable seafood. So we will have a break after approximately 45 minutes. And there will be time for short questions just to clarify things if there are things to be clarified. Otherwise, we can gather all the questions to the very end where we can have a Q&A and joint conversation. So very welcome to write questions in the chat during all the presentations. And we try to keep track of them as we go along. Yes, so as Marietta said, for those of you who are joining now, I'm Jana Holmstedt, and I'm an artist and environmental humanities researcher.
And I'm Malin Lobel, and I'm an artist and gardener. And we are the art collective, part of the biomass, together with Karin, as Marietta said. We will introduce the idea of the community sea garden, or sea allotment, as a site where the topics of restoration, cultivation, as well as environmental changes and challenges might flow together. And we will give you some glimpses from a journey that has led us to the collaboration between us and the marine biologist Maria Bodin or Cecilia Vibjörn, that will deep dive into their fields of expertise a bit later. We also have a guest today, a Nestor in the field, Lena Kautsky, whose work and research have inspired not only us, but a great many devoted to ocean's life. She's been honored with the nickname Pantong, which might be translated into Ornö focus. We are very happy you could join us today, Lena.
Thank you.
Yes, and I thought I could tell a bit about the background. A seed to the sea garden journey was sown back in 2019 when the Posthumanities Hub participated in the Kelp Congress during Lofoten International Art Festival in northern Norway. It was a wonderful week of excursions and workshops and talks and performances. And we also co-wrote a piece on methodologies of kelp for the Kelp Congress book that came out 2020. And this was followed up by a visit to Kristineberg Marine Laboratory on the west coast of Sweden. I hope you don't mind, Cici, the choice of photo. I love it. Where you're showing us the deliciousness of kelp, sugar kelp. So here we went foraging with researchers Fredrik Gröndal at KTH and Ellen Schagerström at Gothenburg University, and learned more about multi-trophic integrative systems and sustainable seafood. Also together with the artist duo cooking sections and Caroline L. Klingborg, who gave a wonderful talk yesterday. And in the same spirit, we visited the wreck zone and the waters of another island this very morning. So we were 9 people, 10, that went to a neighboring island called Sandböte, a nature reserve, but also a significant place both culturally and historically. And me and Malin visited Sandböte the first time 1 year ago, invited by Cecilia Vibjörn, from the Archipelago Foundation, where we were looking for potential test sites for a sea garden in the brackish waters of the Baltic Sea and its stressed environments. And it turned out that Sandböte had a curious connection to the Swedish allotment movement. Cecilia very generously said, choose an island you want to visit. And by chance, we noticed that among all the islands that we could choose from in this booklet that we received, we noticed that Sandböte had actually belonged to Anna Lindhagen, an environmental pioneer, social reformer, politician, a women's rights activist, and together with Anna Åbergsson, she was a leading force in the introduction of allotments in Sweden. She was also one of the founders of the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation. And Anna bought this island for money that she had received as a birthday gift, money collected by members from the Society of the Stockholm allotment. And today her house at Sandböte is a museum. And we thought, what an excellent island to think with when considering the possibilities of future marine allotments for environmental care and protection. So you could say that serendipity is the mother of invention in this case. So this morning, but also during our visit last year, we were very generously guided around by Anders Friström from Naturskyddsföreningen, who has devoted a lot of time and care to the cultural and natural heritage on this island. And among many other things, he told us about the 2 meadows or mowing fields and the different biological characteristics. And he has helped to uphold the tradition of keeping the meadows open, a work that has been carried on actually since the 1700s, despite that people have only lived on the islands in a much shorter period. So when we searched nearby beaches, Cecilia found traces of a third meadow beneath the surface of the sea, an eelgrass meadow, an important habitat currently gaining a lot of attention, especially on the west coast of Sweden, where attempts are made to restore these environments. And other important environments are, of course, the fucus forests. And during this morning's visit, we assigned ourselves the task to search for a rare kind of bloodwrack that seems to have adapted to environmental challenges through spawning during the autumn instead of in May and June, when bloodwrack usually spawns. So equipped with photographs provided by Tångbloggen, run by Lena Kautsky, we started searching for this special kind of bloodwrack. And we'll tell you more about bloodwrack in a moment. But let's first look at the garden as a site and figuration. Why a community sea garden? So part of the Biobands has worked with the garden before in various projects.
Yes, and why a community sea garden? I have previously worked with several years, actually, with participatory projects and gardens, community gardens, and with that kind of experience of how this works, the garden as a frame for a meeting place, a nature culture space, biodiversity, soil factory, learning site, and so on, the different kind of ways it works. How can you take that out to the seaside or out to the sea or on the shore? This is from Bellevue Farm in Stockholm that has been running since 2016. And it's based on a perennial garden, a forest garden. And here is actually an event with artists Liv Strand and Marcus Stoverud in the garden. That's one way of example. And this is another way, another function. Oh, that was a very bad picture for us in the room. Maybe, hopefully you see it better on Zoom. This is another part of Sweden where actually it was a lot of toxification in the ground, and that was a problem. And we connected to a researcher on phytoremediation, Maria Greger on Stockholm University. One thing that's also come back into the sea garden as a problem, especially on the East Coast with toxification in the brackish water. This is just short examples. And then we have this Four Sisters for the Planthropocene. That's work that me and Jana, the part of the biomass, made for the art exhibition in Malmö Art Museum this year during the exhibition Sustainable Societies for the Future. And here we use the garden as a scene for activities, ceremonies, and exercises, talks, and so on. So you can say we use the community garden, which is also a habitat garden, as an open air nature culture. Oh, someone is talking from someone's face. A free university or school to focus on commons, practices of care and ecological literacy. The garden can be a site for co-creation, a worldly reimagining, a place for cultivating more caring and attentive approaches and habits. Here the garden offers itself as a stage. It becomes a planthropocene if we think together with Natasha Myers, who coined the term. She offers planthropocene as, quote, a way of doing life in which people come to recognize their profound interpretation with plants. And just quickly through some pictures from this or Sister for Planthropocene. In the poster here, you can see we followed the year of the seasons, and we started in February with a gift, following by the soil fest, the School of the Plants, the harvest with the chlorophyll bar, and we will have rest and respiration later in November. So the gift. Inside, it's the seeds sunbathing, preparing before being planted out. In March or beginning of April, it was a soil fest involving urban farmers around Malmö Lund and a celebration to soil and the fourth sister. And that was actually also part that we brought into this research project, Humus Economicus, that we are involved in. School of Plants was in May, where it was time to put all these small three sister plantings and out in the garden that has been prepared before. Also, here was also a supporting sister system that was inspired by forest gardening. So also focus on what can we learn from plants using sense and listening, tasting, and so on. The Harvest Fest was mostly like a chlorophyll bar in August. Yes, September, beginning of September. And here we also, let's see, where are we now? There, yeah. With also important thing, we was drinking the voice of the corn or the maize, as inspired by Kimre when she so beautifully speaks about that plants has this universal language. So by drinking the maize, also have open up the senses and understanding of the maize of. Be conscious, or vad säger man, närvarande.
More present.
More present. Presence of the maize at the event. So this way of combining and connecting events, actions and actors and functions and physical sites is also the heart of the sea garden that this experience from land-based community gardens brought them with us to explore the sea or the seashore. Our vision of a sea garden community is that it adapts to local needs and circumstances and to sustain local knowledge as well as cultural heritage. In Sweden, sustainable ocean farming initiative exists that seek to explore system and commercial potentials. The Sea Garden initiative focuses on the equally important aspects of the sea and the shoreline as commons, where the art of cultivating sustainable relations, communities, and local cultures can be granted time and space. So,
the first time we presented the idea of a sea garden to an audience was when we were invited to the water market in Stockholm in August 2020, curated by fabulous Mossutställningar and Stella Diley. And the water market was a civic meeting on climate crisis, where the water constitutes material, context, and inspiration. So there were discussion sites, you could say, with 12 talk hosts, from artists to fishermen, astronomers, hydrologists, who all exchanged thoughts with the audience about water as life, power, faith, environment, and material. And it took place right at the city centre of Stockholm, close to both the parliament and the palace. So in the fountain in the middle, we placed a floating model. And we presented it as a thought model, a discussion piece for a community garden that connects sea and land. And just as bladderwrack provides structures for hundreds of other species, how could a sea garden hold and provide space in similar ways? What kind of structures are needed above and below the water? We discussed functions and site-specific needs, for example, temporal flooding, drafts and shelter, and also the question of scale. Is this a tiny jetty or is it a larger landscape? So at the bottom of the drawing to the left, you could see that we played around with scale since we inserted the silhouettes of a well-known harbour in Stockholm. So it could be a really huge landscape as well.
Yeah, and we put these questions in relation to sea farming and foraging, environmental changes, food security, new food cultures and forms of cultivating the commons. For example, we take a closer look at salt-tolerant plants, halophytes, as soil salination and limited access to fresh water is a future challenge to take into account. We also look at endangered species, like oyster leaf, for example. This is also sea kale, yeah, and also this is perennial foods or plants that's people want to farm in this forest garden as well. But if you're by the sea, maybe the habitat is a little bit better. It could be a good thing to help and grow. Here I'm foraging from my beach in southern Sweden. Yes.
Yes, so the model we presented, important to stress that this is not a design solution in any way. It was a discussion piece through which these topics could be raised and gathered. And we're, of course, not the first ones to think of the possibility of sea gardens. In Denmark, the interest in small-scale sea farming has exploded recently since the first EU-funded pilot in, I think it was 2017. And many initiatives have sprouted at different locations all around Denmark, as you see on the map here. And they are gathered under the umbrella of Havhest. It's Danish for ocean harvest. It's a member organization gathered around regenerative ocean cultivation. But in Sweden, the rules and regulations make it impossible right now to start marine allotments, which is why Maria Bodin is test running the system, so to speak, in her pilot study at Ornö. So we were really thrilled to visit her last November, and she will tell you all about her work after the break. We just wanted to share these lovely pictures with you from November. Here we see sugar kelp at our first visit in November, and then 7 months later in June. And allotment is in the Swedish language called koloni, colony, a word with not the very positive vibe, but nevertheless we come to embrace it because of this ambivalence. We think it stands as a reminder of the tension and fine line between colony forming and colonizing tendencies.
Yeah, and at our second visit to Ornö Marina Lab, where Sissi also was, we were very curious to see also what kind of this colony forming organisms, what could we get inspired from them, for example, through looking through microscopes and so. So what can we learn from this one? And this is a Zephyr Dynamenae pumila. My Latin is very good. And most animals, Bryozoa, for example, and better on the plants. Or also we made this tool for mapping site-specific relation and needs inspired of barnacles. Could they inspire new methods for asking questions? And what are the needs of bladderwrack, for example?
Yes, during our second visit to Ornö in June, we had a 2-day workshop together to discuss the very different conditions on the west coast of Sweden and the east coast with the brackish waters of the Baltic Sea. Yes, and as you know, due to eutrophication and rising temperatures, the Baltic is quite a stressed environment, and bladderwrack is in some regions in decline. We're having a hard time competing for space with grönslik or green algae. And successful attempts at regeneration of bladderwrack in the Baltic Sea has been made by Lena Kautsky and Elle Schagerström. And at their blog, Tångbloggen, their inspiring, entertaining and fascinating research can be followed. And Cecilia Vibjörn has also helped bladderwrack to settle as part of the project Protection Beneath the Surface, that she will tell us more about. And bladderwrack, we've learned, has a very curious law, a love life. So synced by the May and June moon, eggs and sperms are released in the waters. And this, coupled with the fact that midsummer in Sweden is a traditional fertility festivity, made us think of an alternative midsummer celebration devoted to the marvelous blood rack and the fertility of the sea. And traditionally, midsummer celebration in Sweden includes erecting a fertility pole adorned with flowers and green leaves, and gathering 7 kinds of flowers in a bouquet to keep under your pillow at night. And under the influence of this magic night, you might dream about your future bride or groom. So we collected, following this tradition, we picked a bouquet, if you wish, with 7 phenotypes of blood rack and erected an underwater fertility pole. And for the Soten network, we extended an invitation to join us in a midsummer celebration at the June full moon. So if you want to pay tribute to the forests of the sea and help blood rack reproduce, especially in the Baltic Sea, you can help it find new homes. You don't need to erect an underwater midsummer pole, as we did. The only thing you need is a large rock where fertilized eggs of blood rack sea goats can settle, or a brush, so you can scrub off the green algae, the grönslick, below the waterline, nearby where blood rack already grows. And while preparing for this midsummer celebration, this is also when we learned about the rare kind of blood rack that seems to have adapted to environmental changes through spawning during the autumn instead, because then there's not as much green algae around. And that's what we went searching for this morning. And did we find any? Did we find any? We will leave that to Cecilia to tell us later. But we thought that unless there's any immediate questions that you need to clarify right now, we actually wanted to share a 10-minute sound piece with you, the invitation for the blood rack ceremony in June. And we thought we could play that to you, and after that, immediately after that, we could have like a 5-minute break.
Yeah. And back here at 10 to.
Yeah, I don't know what time it is.
We are exactly in time.
So Marietta, are there any immediate questions that we should?
We don't see any immediate questions on the chat. So I mean, no, I'm going to run here, but I mean, there are no immediate questions. So I guess I can share the screen for you.
Yeah. Share the screen. So let's play the sound.
Yeah. Let's listen to the sound.
So probably there's one thing I forgot to do. I think I don't forget to do.
Yeah, take it from the beginning. You have to rewind from the beginning.
The blue islands are pulling me away with after upon the land. Blue islands are oh, the blue of the Falklands are putting love on me as step away my chromic to the Isles. Oh, the blue islands are pulling me away, their laughter puts the leap upon the lane. 'Tis the blue islands from the Skerries to the Lewis, way heather honey taste upon each name. Sure by Tummel and Loch Rannoch and Loch Aber I will go, by heather tracks with heaven in their wilds. If it's thinking in your inner heart the braggart's in my step, you've never smelled the tangle of the Isles. You've never smelled the tangle of the Isles. You've never smelled the tangle of the Isles.
So can you smell the tangle?
Tangle is one of the kelps, and in the islands and highlands they call all seaweed tangle. So it's the smell of home, I guess, and nostalgic smell of the highlands and the islands.
When you listen to this now, on an evening in June, I'm by the sea, preparing to celebrate the secret love life of bladderwrack. I know it as blåstång. I've known it since I was a child. The smooth brown fingers and air-filled bladders covered bone-white barnacles and rough cliffs everywhere we went. Little did I know about its curious life and swollen genitals. Blåstång. We squeezed and popped the bladders with our fingers, like slimy bubble wrap. Can you smell the tangle as it dries and rots on the beach? Soon there will be full moon again. June moon. This is when the bladderwrack releases its eggs and sperms, synced by the tide and the pull of the moon. The eggs sink to the bottom, and the sperms have a simple eye which helps them navigate down into the dark. When they're close enough, they can smell the eggs. Bladderwrack is a key species, as it gives shelter to hundreds of other species. They feed and host millions of creatures. It's a bad sign when they disappear. Tonight we're ready for algae sex and assisted fertilization. Without this kelp and the forests of the sea, we wouldn't be able to breathe. Soon the bladderwrack will release its eggs and sperms.
So let's have a 5 minutes break and we'll meet back 10 to 3. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you're seated. I'm so happy to be here with you, Cecilia Vibjörn, from Skärgårdsstiftelsen, the Archipelago Foundation.
Yes.
You're a marine biologist
Yes.
and actually studied for Lena Kautsky.
Yes.
Long ago. And you've been diving in the Baltic Sea for over 20 years.
Yes, I have.
And since 95, you're employed with the Archipelago Foundation and work with various projects focused on the protection beneath the surface of the sea.
Yes.
And you will tell us all about that now.
I will. Thank you, Jana. And I will start to say thank you for having me here in this group with all you nice people. I'm really enjoying. And I also would like to say thank you to Malin and Jana's nice presentation. And I enjoyed the sound of the bladderwrack. I was touched, actually. I was moved. But I work at the Archipelago Foundation, Skärgårdsstiftelsen in Stockholm. And before I tell you about my work under the surface, I will give you a shortly presentation about the foundation for who is familiar with the organization. See if I can. Okay, fine. We were formed in 1959, and that was in a time when people were moving out from the archipelago. It was depopulated, and people had more free time, spare time, and they would like to be outside, doing outdoor activities, recreation. And in 1998, the foundation was reorganized as it is today. We are 70 people today working at the foundation. 40 of us are rangers and work with conservation out on the islands. And many of them live on their island or near the islands. And we are also 30 people in the office working with finance, administration, nature conservation, planning, laws, and project management. We also have a board, and they are appointed by the region of Stockholm and also by the municipalities connected to the archipelago. And they are led by a working committee. We have over 40 properties or nature reserve areas spread all over the Stockholm County, as you see on this map. I will see if I can point out, you see this one. Today, we are at this island, Ornö. It's not one of the islands of the Archipelago Foundation, but you can see outside Ornö, this small island is Sandböte, that we were today. And my work and my project, this protection under the surface, I have my test areas here, Gålö, connected to the mainland, and also this island, Nottarö, and it's outside Nynäshamn. And my test area is in the northern part of Nottarö. We actually are the third largest property owners in Stockholm County. We own 12,000 hectares of land and over 20,000 hectares of water. So it's quite a lot. And all these are nature reserves, and they are open to the public, and they are protected in different ways, and also lots of animal protection areas. And all these places are very differently in character. There are wood, big forests, and there are skerries and only stones and nothing more. On this land, there is a lot of buildings as well, over 2,000 buildings actually. And they are also very different. Manor houses, farms, boat houses, lighthouses, mills. And some of them are really old also. And we try to use them in our daily work for the public. But if we can't use them ourselves, we rent them out or lease them out for others to run their business, tourism, or maybe they can live. We have permanent residence and also summer houses for rent. And the Archipelago Foundation also plays an important role in tourism in the archipelago. Many of our houses, they have restaurants, there are hotels, cabins, guest harbors. So that is the part of the organization who is commercial, like these buildings and this tourism thing. And the money that we get in from rented out all the houses and leases out the buildings, that should cover the take caring for these buildings. And the other side of the activities at our organization is all the outdoor activities. People are here using the nature They come with their tents, they are hiking, they are using our snorkel trays, they are barbecuing. So that's an important role for us. And of course, the nature conservation. We have 16 farms today, a lot of cows and sheep. So 10 of them are on the mainland and 6 is out on the islands. And our staff, they work with these maintenance plans that we have for all the reserves. They work with restoration. They also do the cleaning and take care of plants and trees. There is also some huntings in our areas. And there are lots of projects going on. And they are almost always funded by private money and some public money as well. But they are not in the whole money of our organization. So the projects are all often separate money. And there is my role today at the Archipelago Foundation. I work with the water, and not the drinking water, it's the nature water. And especially it's a project that we call Protection Under the Surface. And it's a cooperation between Worldwide Foundation, funded by private money. And as I said in the start, we've been here for 60 years, but the maintenance plans always been focusing on land. Everything is written and plans are written with focus on land. And we will change that now and start to focus on the water and have plans and conservation plans for the waters as well. So in this project, we will test different ways to make a change in the shallow bays on the waters that we actually manage. We will give tools to other land and water owners who also want to take care of their shallow bays for coming generations. When we started, we actually have some divers who've been documented 2 of our reserves, Gåle on the mainland that I pointed out, and also Nottara, the island outside Nynäshamn. And when they were documented the bottoms, they saw these signs of damage on the bottoms. And we think it's coming from the anchors. But I mean, we wasn't there, so we are not sure. But we see similar patterns. So we have these big meetings with the scientists, and there were boat owners, boat builders, marina managers, and we all agreed to put out some buoys in this nature harbor to test if we could have a spot in the bay that you didn't use your anchor. Would it make a difference? And we will send the divers in every year to check if we can see the signs of that there is a difference. Here you can see 10 of the buoys. In June last year, we put out 25 of them. And these 10, you see, we call them stern buoys because you lie with your boat and have your stern to the buoy and then the front to land. And in the back of the picture, you can see a sailboat, and that one is lying on the wobbling buoy. So it just connected in one place and it can move around a bit. And this buoy it's a long buoy. We're also calling a standing buoy, and it's very flexible. So one part of this Östermarsfladen have these 25 buoys, and we don't have put in any signs that you shouldn't be anchoring here, it's forbidden or anything like that. But instead we are giving opportunity to use these buoys instead of anchoring. So in the other part of the bay, they still will be anchoring as usual. Here is a closer picture on the buoy. And I will tell you that this harbor, nature harbor, is very popular. In one night there can be 200 boats, and that is normal. And some nights it can be 400 boats, and that's maybe a bit much, but it's a lot of boats and it's lots of anchor going up and down in these bottoms. And it's soft sediment bottom here. So we thought that now that we will put out 25 buoys, we also put out 25 big stones. And then we thought maybe this could be an opportunity to try to spawn and help the bladderwrack. So we did. And you heard from Jana and Malin about our midsummer ceremony. But actually, this is a manual how to spawn bladderwrack, written by Lena and 2 other scientists, Ellen and Susanne. This manual explains how to collect the shots of bladderwrack with these sperm and eggs containers, and you made a bouquet of them, and you put them out over a stone or something. And here we have this clean big stone waiting for them. So we did it on 10 stones last year. And because of a lot of things, it was a bit late, but so we didn't hit the full moon that we first were planning. But we thought maybe it can work at half moon also. So we tried. And 6 weeks after we put them out, we collect them in again, because now they need all the light they can have to grow properly. And you can see that in September last year, the divers could actually see the small plants on the stone. They were only some millimeters. But on this picture, it was taken this year in May. So you can see they've grown the whole winter, and now they are about 3 to 5 centimeters. So they survived the winter, and the test succeeds. So we were very happy. We have these bladderwrack babies on the stones. And this year we tested it on the other 15 buoys stones that we have. And now we are waiting for the result of them. In the Östermalmsfladen, we also have seen the eelgrass meadows. And we've also seen signs of damage in the eelgrass meadows. And to restore eelgrass is quite common in the West Coast. And the eelgrass is also more common on the West Coast because it's a marine species, because it's a little bit too brackish water here in the Baltic, but it can manage to live here. So the outer reach for the eelgrass is the northern part of the archipelago in Stockholm. And we knew that in Kalmar, they've been tested to restore eelgrass. But we think it's the first time in Stockholm archipelago we have been trying to do this. Because we see signs in the meadows that are clear of no plants at all. So the divers collect some shots from the eelgrass and try to put them in the bare squares. So here you see they collect the very gentle in these nice meadows. So they actually can't use any gloves. They have to do it with the bare hands, and it was really, really cold because they have to feel in the bottom. Because when they start to do this, the grumbling and the shading of the water is starting. So they can't see anything. They just have to feel with their fingers when they collect. And because that is also an important role for the eelgrass, it keeps the soft bottoms in place. That's also very important for other species. They clarify the water. So you more eelgrass, the clearer water. And when you start to lose the eelgrass, then you have more bare space and it's starting to grumble. And it's harder for them to go back. So this project it's active restoration and also the passive restoration, because some of the space we leave with nothing in them, and we just mark the end of the meadows with the sticks, and then we will see over time if the eelgrass can grow back for themselves. And everything is documented from year to year, and we also got help from Josefin Sagerman from SLU. She is do the statistical work on this project. So we actually are waiting now for the result, because this project will end this year. So now we are waiting for the result of this year's bladderwrack spawning and the planting of the eelgrass. So this is a first step to see, can you restore areas in the shallow bottoms of the Baltic Sea? So if you're interested, you can follow me at our website, Skargardstiftelsen.se. And I say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chrissy. I stop sharing here now. And I'm very happy to introduce Maria Bodin from Gothenburg University, stationed at Tjärnö Marine Laboratory. I'm looking at the screen here, but you're actually there. And since childhood, you've been fascinated with the sea, with everything from whales to algae. And you also worked as a biologist, marine biologist for 20 years, something, with very different tasks. I mean, you've been doing musicals for kids, for example, and projects such as Scary Seafood, and a pilot study on Sweden's first marine allotments. And we are thrilled to hear you tell us more about the marine allotment project.
Okay, can you hear me and can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. So thank you very, very much for inviting me. And this is really, really exciting, this combination between science and art, I think. This is the first time for me in this kind of combination. So I will give you a short presentation about a blue community garden, the future paintry. I've conducted a pilot study at Tjärnö Marine Laboratory at Gothenburg University. And this pilot study is in a bigger project called Marint Gränsforum Skagerrak. And that is a collaboration between Sweden and Norway. And we're working around Skagerrak area, especially in the business region. Ska vi se. So as you mentioned, I've been working as a marine biologist, and when I was counting, 20 years, oh God. Right now, I'm placed at Tjärnö Marine Laboratory, and it's close to the Norwegian border on the west coast, Strömstad. and it's the research station belonging to Gothenburg University. And right now I'm working with scary seafood, and it's a product when you try to use unused seafood from the sea. Also blue community gardens, and I also work with science and knowledge tourism. To put this blue community garden in a bigger perspective, so the Earth's surface consists of about 70% ocean, but only 5 to 6% of the total food production comes from the sea. The Earth's population is growing rapidly, and we face a great challenge for the food to be enough for everyone. So we need to eat more food from the sea. And this picture is from Sweden, but I think it could be the Scandinavian as well. Today we eat fillet from the fish, cod, salmon. We eat some prawns, crayfish, and occasionally lobster. But what we want in the future is to eat more species from the sea. It could be different species of prawns, for instance, but also algae, tunicates. We eat only 70% of the fish. We almost eat just the fillet. We could eat the whole fish. And even if we have a selected fishery, we still got some bycatch. Can we use it in a more sustainable way? So grow your own food in a blue community garden. Is that a part of the solution to feed the growing population? So as Janna mentioned earlier, Havhöst in Denmark is a really interesting organization. Right now I'm working with them, but in the beginning, before I started work with them, they were a really big inspiration, and they work to educate people, students around cultivating, farming in the sea and eat more seafood. So the purpose of my pilot study was to create a blue community garden in a simple and cheap way, to develop a model, a design, to test different species, tools and methods, and start to map laws, regulation and permits. And I said start because it's really, really complicated in Sweden, these different permits and the different authorities who are working with this. This is not connected together. It's much easier in Denmark and Norway. And also to create a public information focusing on marine cuisine and aquaculture of the future. And what I did was I bought some booms, I reused some old nets and cages. I hang out ropes to inventory which organisms are in the water. I also hang out some ropes with shoots of algae. And I also connected different projects and knowledge about aquaculture to make the information available for the public. So we were towing, placing and mounting the booms, and we used already existing jetty on Ornö laboratory. I put all the ropes in the water, but we also connected some research projects to the garden. And the goal and the vision was to gain knowledge of how to construct, design a blue community garden, which species and methods works, and what permits are required. And also to create a public information place for the aquaculture. And these are a few of the species that we were testing. We were testing sugar kelp, sea lettuce, shore crab, blue mussels, tunicates, and common prawns. As you can see from Janna's and Malin's picture, this is a little bit the same. So we put some ropes and settling bands in September in the water. And these pictures are, the upper left is from March, and there you can see the upper left is blue mussels that were settling. On the same rope we found tunicates on the upper right. And the small shoots on the left, lower left, they were like 1.5 to 1 centimeters in September, and the picture to the right, it's in March. So this is really interesting because they're you're growing or farming in the winter. You don't need to add any water and nutrients. There are nutrients enough for all the farming in the sea. This pilot study resulted in a cooperation, a new product, like a spin-off product called Havhöstnorden, and it's a cooperation between Havhöst in Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. And what we want to do, it's very, very short projects in 1 year. So we wanted to map and create network with relevant actors like stakeholders, companies, and associations. And also we have wanted to map the laws, regulation, and permits for each country and try to compare it. So, for instance, in Norway, there is one application to the fylkeskommune, and all the authorities that are connected, they do it in the fylkeskommune, and there will be one application in and one answer back. In Sweden, they're not, the authorities are not connecting in any way. So this will be really interesting. There are lots of projects that are going on with this to update the laws or the regulations around the sea. We're also looking to future financing to see how we could continue this work, to work together with these different countries and different knowledge, and the project will also connect to projects that already have ongoing activities, for instance, this today. Very, very short. So we have this website about what in Swedish called Marina kolonilotter, and I'm not sure if it's translated, but there is a website on Gothenburg University web. And if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to send me a mail or ask me later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. And I think we go ahead with Lena Kautsky from Stockholm University Baltic Sea Center. I'm very happy you're here today. And you started your PhD in 1970, investigating a small polluted bay of the Baltic Sea. And after that, you found that you couldn't leave the marine environment. Too many questions waiting to be solved. So your focus the past 30 years has been on factors affecting the bloodrock forests and lately how climate change may change its distribution. So I hand over to you, Lena. Really looking forward to this. If you just unmute yourself.
No, I think. Do you hear me? Am I still mute?
No, we hear you. We hear you. It's perfect.
Good. Yes. Oh, sorry. It goes much too fast. So I went out this morning to the small beach. I have a house now close to the shoreline of a bay in the Baltic Sea, nearby the big harbor Kapellskär, where you can go with the ferries over to Finland and Åland. And I took the picture, and I also think that we should, like Stacy told, it's very difficult to understand what's happening in the deep sea, but it's also extremely difficult to understand what's happening close to the shore on the windy morning or in one of these mirror, when the water is like a mirror. So we really need to have maybe these small Baltic Sea gardens or whatever, you adopt your own little bay. And I have adopted this small bay and want to come back to what I found and so on at the end of the talk. But I will start with these fucus species that I've been studying for quite a number of years now, and their distribution. And we have 3 species in the Baltic Sea. Up in the northern part here, we have a species called Fucus radicans, or narrow rack small tongue in Swedish. Then we have the most common species, which is the bladder rack, Fucus vesiculosus. And then we also have some Fucus serratus in the southern part and also on the Swedish west coast. And there is a big change. If you go for the Fucus vesiculosus, they only grow very, very shallow on the Swedish west coast. But entering into the Baltic Sea, you will see that they grow from almost at the surface down to 10, 15 meters or more. So it's a very common or important species, this long-lived Fucus vesiculosus or bladder rack in the Baltic Sea. And we also in the southern part have Fucus serratus. And we could use Fucus or the bladder rack as an indicator for Baltic Sea health. What are the conditions for the Baltic Sea? Since Fucus forests, they provide shelter and food. There are lots of these small animals in one thalli or plant of Fucus. It's quite good substrate for perch and place its roe. And I did studies many years ago now and found out that each of these single plants, if the branch here might not be more than 4 or 5 years old or 6 years, but from the holdfast there comes out new branches all the time. So it can get very old. So I estimated that maybe a plant in Fucus in the Baltic Sea is about 30 or 40 years. And so this concept of Fucus as a forest of the Baltic Sea is really relevant. And we should do a lot of things like Cecilia talked about, maybe restoring or planting, but it could also be a good indicator of how bad or good has the conditions been in the Baltic Sea for Fucus over the years. So we could not know really anything if we hadn't had some very good researcher, Mats Wern, who started as a professor in Uppsala. And he investigated the Fucus belts and the algae belts in the Baltic Sea in the 40s. So one of his first investigations was 1944. And if we didn't have any mapping or any knowledge about how deep would it grow or where would it found and what kind of communities was around the bladder rack, then we wouldn't have any starting point for seeing the changes, because there has been lots of changes since the time before industrialization in the Baltic Sea. And he went back to the same sites. These were in the northern part of the Baltic Sea, close to Norrtälje. But he also made documentations with putting a frame out in the water and collecting everything within a small square, 20 times 20 centimeters square. And he put everything what he found on a sheet and made a herbarium of it. So we can go back now and see what it really looked like, not just the single species, but also these communities. And then it was repeated in 84, 40 years later, and he came along and was quite happy to go out. He had his notebooks and everything. Exactly this little spot was where he was diving 40 years earlier. And he went out with, among others, with my husband. And these sites are now monitored in the National Monitoring Program. So I tried to make some illustrations of past time before our industrialization took place. And at that time, we had fucus growing down to about 12 meters depth. But we didn't have it growing very shallow because we have lots of ice scraping off the fucus in the upper parts of the Baltic Sea. And we had clear water and they were able to grow down to like 12 meters in this area. For a long period, we put out a lot of sewage, untreated sewage, which was one of the things that I was studying in this small bay inside Stockholm from the 70s. So from 1960s to 1980s, we started to do some reduced output of nutrients, but in many areas, the nutrient content was too high and fucus bladderwrack stands were disappearing. And these red areas, we have documented the disappearance in Riga Bay, down in Gdansk, around Kiel, Rostock, and also outside Stockholm Archipelago. And they were loaded with epiphytes covering the fucus plants, so it was really difficult for them to get enough light. And also we had some pulp mill effluents containing chlorine from bleaching process that really killed off the bladderwrack populations outside the industries. So Mönsterås and many industries along the Swedish coastline here, outside these outlets, there were no fucus or bladderwrack left. So this was a really bad time. And during this time, we still had a lot of ice scoring around the surface, so they couldn't grow in the more shallow area. And the light conditions out in the water was really getting bad, so they moved up into around 8 meters, 5, 6 meters, depending on where in the archipelago. So we also had a lot of filamentous algae shading, and it was a really narrow belt of fucus. And in some areas, they were even lost totally. So to improve the conditions, we cleared up a lot of sewage treatment plants. And this graph from Helcom shows that we have a reduction from the 70s, reduced amount of nitrogen coming out, and we also have a reduced amount of phosphorus coming out, getting close to what is sort as a maximum allowable input of phosphorus. We still have a bit to go for nitrogen. We have already below this amount of nitrogen. So this has resulted in something very positive. Sometimes we have so much negative talks about what's happening, and in the present time we have quite strong recovery and also these possibilities of restoration coming up. So with the fucus forest now, with the mild winters, fucus will survive very shallow. And we even get some reports from Stockholm Archipelago now that people are a bit upset because they get so much fucus drifting into the shoreline around the autumn. So it's really difficult to take care of it and bring it up on land and maybe do some compost material. And clearing up the water has also resulted in that we now can see that it's not back at 12 meters, but it's getting close to its 10. So it's moving deeper and deeper because the water is clearer and clearer. And it's still a lot of filamentous algae in many areas. And the stickleback, if you go diving, there will be an angry male stickleback trying to protect the fucus plant so that you don't take it for any monitoring analysis. So summarizing this, we had before the 30s, clear water and ice scraping, fucus down to 12. Then it was really bad time during the 60s and 80s with turbid water and algae blooms, and still some cold winters with ice scraping up here. And in the present time, we have this really mild winter, which is a climate change, which for the fucus is a positive effect, because we have a broader and wider distribution of fucus from close to the surface down to maybe 10 meters. So what will happen in the future with a change in salinity and maybe also warmer summers? This figure shows all the marine species that are now, many of them quite far north in the Baltic proper, Bothnian Sea. Fucus is here around 4 to 5 per mil, moving down to in 80-100 years, it will be around here. Sorry. So we will have this area still with Fucus radicans. The narrow rack will still be able to grow here, but no Fucus vesiculosus. And then we will have Fucus serratus, which is now growing around here, around 7 per mil, will have moved down here. So for me as a researcher doing all these studies on the lovely life of Fucus vesiculosus and its romance in the moonlight, I'm feeling a bit sad if this will really happen. But there will be a lot of other species taking over the space, both freshwater species and new introduced species. So we will have this mitten crab, we will have some new seagrasses, we will have the black ground goby, the barnacles we already have. And now, last few weeks ago, we went out and found this American mussel that's found, the zebra mussel, and also this other and many more sites in the Baltic Sea. But it will, if the projections of climate change will continue, the Baltic Sea will become a bit more like a lake with very few marine species on the hard bottom will be left, but there will be lots of macrophytes to grow on the sandy and muddy bottoms, but the eelgrass will be gone. So this was a short view of what might happen, and we live in this constantly changing world of doing research, which I think is really fun. You have to believe me. And over the years, I have also been doing some preparing, cooking seaweed salads, and you can make these wonderful stars of fucus. And I have a small ladder where I go swimming in this common Baltic Sea garden that I try to protect. So I get very happy every day. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Lena. I would like to ask Sissi and Malin to come and join me here, actually, and see if there are any questions. Let's take the opportunity to ask these experts on marine life. Maria, you actually had a question for Sissi.
Yeah, I can take it. I wonder, when you restore the eelgrass, did you use seeds as well, or just the plants?
We only use plants. I think the most common in the Baltic is that the eelgrass doesn't use seeds at all, but I'm not sure. But we only used plants. Yes.
They don't produce any seeds. They don't flower.
No.
It's too cold usually.
Okay.
But the divers have been out there now, and I wait for the results if they have survived the summer, because I don't know that. And maybe it's hard to see. Maybe we have to wait a year to see. I mean, the eelgrass can look green and nice, even it's floating around. So we will see if it's still living next summer, I think. We're very excited about that.
How do you anchor them? So that how do you connect them to the bottom?
It's really simple, actually. We just put them down in the mud, in the soft bottom. When you're planting on land, down and try to, so it's something harder, not only very, very soft bottoms, but it's quite brutal, I think. So it's they don't see anything, the divers. They have to go down and actually have a plan for this is the way I will swim, because when they start, they can't see anything.
Okay.
We actually have a question for you, Maria. If you have any report from the June spawning, if there are any tiny babies to be seen, have you been able to go down?
No, I haven't, because I need a boat and I need some strong company. So no, I haven't. But when the results, I will just call you right away.
And we forgot to tell you that we actually found some autumn spawning bladderwrack at Sandbälte. We didn't expect. I didn't expect to, at least.
Should I go and get some?
Yeah, you can. You can go. I can go
and see if you got some companions.
Oh. So maybe I should ask you, Lena. Were you surprised that we found it?
Yes, I don't have any reports from it from that part of the archipelago.
Have you received a lot of reports from this kind of open call that you issued for observing?
Yes, I have quite a number of reports, but the main reports from Öland with some more autumn reproducing plants.
Can I ask you, Lena, what is your thinking about this autumn spawning bladderwrack? Has it always been like this, do you think, or have we doesn't look for it, or is it a new way for it to try to spawn?
Yeah, we did some investigations about, time is running, about 20 years ago. And at that time, we mainly found it on the mainland at Kalmar. And we also found it at a few sites. I had one small site at outside Asker Laboratory. And the general idea is that this increased amount of filamentous algae in summer that still exists on the rocks in the Baltic Sea makes it very difficult for a summer reproducing fucus to establish, and that the autumn reproduction should be, or the autumn reproductive plants should be able to spread more and be found at more sites. So depending on how much reports I get in, I have some more also from some other areas. I would like to have or make a new larger study on if it has changed from the sites that we looked at where it was only summer, if there are now some sites that has changed over to autumn reproduction. So this is very exciting if you have some.
Yeah, we hope we got it right then. Malin is looking for. It's not the big one. I thought it was the smaller one.
Okay, talk. I have some other questions to talk.
Yeah, do you have any questions here in the room? Yes, maybe you need to come here, Anne-Marie.
Ja, vad mycket olika nu.
De allra minsta på botten. Yes, please come here.
I have a question to Cici, actually. I mean, this is not your expertise, but
Please lean in.
do you see any, I mean, there is an interconnection, obviously, of between the balance of land and the balance of the sea. But do you see that? Do you see something happening on land, on the islands, or also on the continental part of the region where you see that there is something influencing the balance or the health of the sea, of the Baltic Sea?
Yes, we have the reeds that grows. We have documented spaces that didn't have any weeds at all. Or we look at old pictures, old map pictures from aircraft pictures from below, and now we see the space are a lot of reeds. And I mean, reeds it's a natural species, and it should be on some spaces, but there we can clearly see that here is a lot of nutrients affecting the new reed spot. So you can actually see it in that way, and that it's changing. Bays are that before was clear are now full of reeds. And I mean, reeds is also good for species, but in some cases, it's really a sign of nutrients.
Yeah, is it even possible to show it to the camera?
To this.
Yeah, hold it still and go.
Yes. The bladders and the receptacles. Yes.
What was that?
We made it.
We made it. There is some species with some butter.
And I took a photo of one who was connected to the bottom because this one was floating on the beach. But I saw someone who was still stuck. But I was photographed the place, Lena.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's growing there actually.
I was in this Algforskarsommar or algal research summer project that we had for citizen science to attend the summer, asked or told that they could be just going looking for drifting the fronds now in the autumn. Because then even if you don't know that they are really growing just there, then you can find them drifting on the seashore line. And then you could look next year because it's getting a bit cold into the water now.
Is citizen science important contributions to the work you're doing?
This is the first year, and it's a bit of a test to see which kind of questions are the best way of getting data. And the other part of this project is similar to this Baltic Sea Garden or other concepts where it's a way of getting everyone interested in learning more about the Baltic Sea and the life close to the shoreline that is reachable for everyone. It has quite a lot of, from my point of view, is lots of teaching or learning or information of learning to see the difference between different green algae or red algae or what's living in the bladderwrack.
Yes, Maria, I remember that you told us.
What's the name of the...
Oh, sorry, we have a delay here, apparently. I just want to ask you, Maria, before you put your question to Lena, I just find it so interesting that people are calling you all the time over the phone. Where can I sign up for these marine allotments? And you try to explain that, oh, there isn't any yet. So there is apparently a huge interest in engaging with the sea in this way.
Oh, I didn't hear. Well, can you pop the question again? Because there was really bit. Maybe I should move because now I have a really bad connection.
Oh, yes. Yes, while you're moving, I was just retelling what you've told us so many times, that people are calling you all the time, wanting to sign up for these marine allotments. So people are showing a huge interest in engaging with the sea in this way, but it's not possible in Sweden at the moment.
No, yeah, it's really, really interest, both from the schools and teachers and companies and private persons. And what we do is to connect them in a network so we can work together, because the permits, you can do it, but it's really, really difficult with all different permits and it costs a lot. We are looking in a model that they're using in Denmark, that there are permits for hobby farming, so we can try in an easier way, but still there is a big step to get this to this step, and we are trying to have a dialogue with the authorities to start, first of all, start a dialogue to talk about the permits and the law and regulations. But yes, there's a really, really big interest in this. And we have to be really careful because we don't have the solution yet. This is just I'm not sure what you say in English, but look into the future. We don't have the solution, but this could be a solution if we have the right permits and we do it the right way, actually.
Maria, what do you think about comparing Swedish West Coast, where you have a lot of species that are really interesting to grow or to cultivate on a rope, or also compared to the Baltic Sea, where the blue mussels will get this small?
Yeah. We have people from Finland actually who's really interested in this as well. So we're thinking we can do, I think the way we use, there are 3 different angles that we can use this blue community gardens. You can cultivate or farm for future food. You can also have it like outreach or ocean literacy, but also you can have it like in the Baltic for ecosystem services, actually. But I think the most important is to inform the situation around the sea, actually. And then because of permits, and it's a long way to get all the permits to just cultivate for your own. So I think I think you can do it. You have to see what kind of species are suitable in the area where you're living, and but the most important is the information around the sea, I think.
Yes, I think it's getting time to wrap up, and I want to open up if there is any last question in the Zoom room or in this room here. Yeah,
I can ask Elena the thing. The project about the citizen science, what's it called?
Algforskarsommar.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm really interested in this citizen science, how we can use it in a good way and get the right data. That would be perfect. Thank you.
I'm so happy you could be with us today and show a bit more from the projects you're working with. And I'm also so happy we could do this excursion this morning. I felt like, okay, this is the place to be, touch ground and really engage with the very, very local environments, but with the planetary in mind. So it was a really great day for for us. And I'm so happy you could be with us.
Yeah, I would have really liked to be there with you going for that trip, but it wasn't possible. Next time.
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Next time, in the summer, perhaps in the spring. I would love to see the place.
Baltic summer. Yes. So thank you very much again. And I guess we're having a break, and we will be back when, in half an hour, Marietta, or
An hour.
in an hour. Okay. So we'll meet you back at 5 Swedish time. That is. In a different Zoom room. So check out your email you received from Marietta with all the Zoom links, and we'll meet you there in an hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you.